We here.
It began like any ordinary day in Monroe, Louisiana, the kind of quiet southern town where people still greet each other by name and watch out for one another's children. But on the evening of March 6, 2023, that peace was shattered. 25-year-old Tabitha Tanner, a vibrant young woman with a spark for life and a soft heart, vanished without a trace. One moment she was headed out with someone she trusted, and the next, she was gone. Her disappearance wasn't just a mystery. It was a gut punch to a tight-knit community that loved her. Tabitha wasn't the kind of person to disappear without saying something. She was responsible, communicative, and always checked in with her family. Her mother, who usually talked to her daily, knew something was wrong the moment the phone stopped ringing. That silence was deafening. And as the hours passed, a deep sense of dread began to sink in. Something just wasn't right. And soon, that gut feeling would become every parent's worst nightmare. Within 24 hours of her disappearance, a missing persons report was filed. The urgency intensified when police learned Tabitha had been last seen in the company of her ex-boyfriend, a man with whom she shared a complicated and emotionally charged past. She had gotten into his vehicle, perhaps one last conversation, perhaps to gain closure, perhaps because she still held on to the hope that people could change. Whatever the reason, that was the last time she was seen alive. The search efforts were swift and emotional. Flyers were printed. Family members went door to door, and social media flooded with photos of Tabitha's bright smile, a desperate plea for help from a community praying she'd come home safe. Volunteers joined law enforcement in searching the area. Her name became a prayer in many homes, and for days, hope lingered in the air like morning dew, fragile but clinging. Then, days later, the news everyone feared but somehow wasn't prepared for hit like a tidal wave. Tabitha Tanner's body was discovered, wrapped in a sheet and hidden in a dumpster behind a Dollar Tree store in Monroe. The horror of it all sank in slowly. Not just that she had died, but how she had been discarded like she didn't matter. But she did. She mattered deeply to her family, her friends, and now to every person who would come to know her name. The suspect? Her ex-boyfriend, the same man she had trusted enough to ride with that night. His arrest was swift, but it brought no comfort, only more questions. How could someone she once loved do this? What happened in those final hours? And why hadn't anyone seen the signs of what was to come? As details began to emerge, a chilling portrait of manipulation, control, and violence unfolded. The story wasn't just about a missing woman anymore. It was about a pattern far too many know of toxic relationships, silent suffering, and the fatal cost of domestic violence. Tabitha's story, tragically, was becoming one shared by thousands of women across the country. And yet, even in death, Tabitha's light hasn't gone out. Her story has sparked conversations around a dinner table, in city council meetings, and online about the urgent need for better protection for women, for mental health support, and for domestic violence awareness. Her family, in their grief, has taken up the torch, determined that her death will not be in vain. This case isn't just about what happened to Tabitha. It's about what we, as a community, as a society, must do differently. It's about how we look out for each other, how we speak up when something feels off, and how we never again allow a young woman's cry for help to go unheard. In this video, we're going to walk through the heartbreaking story of Tabitha Tanner. We'll explore who she was, what happened on that fateful night, the investigation that followed, and how her community and many others are vowing to remember her by fighting for change. This is Tabitha's story, and it's one we all need to hear. Before her name became a headline, before her face was shared in countless social media posts and news reports, Tabitha Tanner was simply Tabby to those who loved her. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, full of energy, laughter, and love. Her smile had a way of lighting up the room, and her kind heart drew people in. She had dreams, plans, and a spirit that made others feel at ease. Her life was full of potential, and that made her loss all the more devastating. Tabitha was 25 years old and living in Monroe, Louisiana. She had a close relationship with her mother and spoke with her often. In fact, their bond was so tight that her mom immediately sensed when something was wrong, a mother's intuition that would prove heartbreakingly accurate. Tabitha wasn't just someone you could easily forget. Her presence lingered, her laughter echoed, and her absence was deeply felt when she suddenly went quiet. Her friends describe her as someone who would go out of her way to check on others. She had a nurturing personality, often being the one people turned to when they needed comfort or encouragement. She loved music, fashion, and spending time with family, the little things that build a beautiful, ordinary life. Tabitha was still figuring things out, like many young women her age, but she was trying, learning, and growing into herself. At some point in her life, Tabitha entered into a relationship with a man named Aaron Mitchell. While details about their relationship remain somewhat private, it is clear from later events that their connection had become unhealthy and potentially abusive. What began as affection seemed to shift over time into something darker, something that would eventually end in tragedy. Friends and family had noticed red flags, but like many victims of toxic relationships, Tabitha may have kept much of the turmoil to herself. Perhaps she hoped things would get better. Perhaps she believed in change. Or maybe, like so many women in similar situations, she didn't want to burden others with her pain. Whatever her reasons, she carried the weight of that relationship quietly and painfully. It's important to recognize that Tabitha's story is not isolated. Many women, especially young women, find themselves in difficult and manipulative relationships without knowing how to leave safely. The silence that surrounds domestic violence can be deadly, but in sharing her story, we begin to break that silence. We begin to honor her truth. In remembering who Tabitha was, beyond the headlines, we remember her humanity. She was more than a victim. She was a whole person with a life, a personality, and a heart full of love. And now, as we move forward in the story, we carry her memory with us. We owe her that much, to remember, to listen, and to learn from what happened. The timeline of Tabitha Tanner's disappearance and the events that followed is a heartbreaking journey filled with unanswered calls, desperate searches, and a devastating discovery. It all began in early April 2024, when Tabitha suddenly went silent. For someone who maintained regular contact with her loved ones, especially her mother, this was not just unusual, it was alarming. Her mother immediately sensed that something was wrong, a feeling that would only intensify as the hours and days went on. On April 7th, 2024, Tabitha's mother officially reported her missing. By then, family and friends had already begun their own search, calling her phone repeatedly, reaching out to friends, and scouring social media for any sign of her. Panic began to set in. Tabitha's car was eventually found abandoned near an apartment complex in Monroe, Louisiana, with her purse and phone still inside. The scene was chilling. It was clear something was terribly wrong. Police opened an investigation into her disappearance, and the public was asked to come forward with any information. Flyers with Tabitha's photo were shared online, urging anyone who had seen her to speak up. Her family's pain and confusion were palpable, but they remained hopeful. Days passed, and the hope of finding her safe began to wane, giving way to growing fear. On April 14th, 1 week after she was reported missing, the nightmare reached its tragic conclusion. Authorities confirmed that Tabitha's body had been discovered in a wooded area near the Washita River. The location was remote, surrounded by brush and away from public view. It was a deliberate and cruel attempt to conceal her. The news shattered her family, her friends, and the wider community that had held out hope for a different outcome. Investigators quickly zeroed in on Tabitha's ex-boyfriend, Aaron Mitchell. He had been one of the last people known to have seen her alive. Their relationship, as later confirmed by those close to Tabitha, had grown increasingly volatile in the months leading up to her death. There had been arguments, concerns about control and manipulation, and subtle signs of danger, signs that sadly became more visible only in hindsight. Mitchell was arrested soon after and charged with second-degree murder. According to investigators, evidence linked him to both the location of the body and the events surrounding Tabitha's disappearance. As the legal process unfolded, so did the public's awareness of the warning signs Tabitha may have experienced, and how easily those signs are missed or downplayed in everyday life. This timeline isn't just a set of dates and facts. It's a timeline of heartbreak, of hope fading into grief, and of a community rallying together to demand justice. Each moment is a piece of a larger story, one that speaks not only to Tabitha's final days, but to the broader issue of intimate partner violence and the need for stronger protections and support systems for women like her. As soon as Tabitha was reported missing, law enforcement agencies in Monroe, Louisiana sprang into action. The initial hours were filled with urgency, especially given the ominous clues already on hand. Her abandoned car, untouched phone, and lack of communication. Investigators understood they were likely racing against the clock. They began gathering surveillance footage, conducting interviews, and mapping out the final known movements of Tabitha Tanner. A major breakthrough came from analyzing digital data. Investigators traced Tabitha's cell phone activity and vehicle location history. This information painted a rough picture of her last known whereabouts and revealed that her car had been parked at the apartment complex for quite some time. This, along with witness testimonies, allowed police to start narrowing their focus on individuals close to Tabitha, especially her ex-boyfriend, Aaron Mitchell. Aaron was no stranger to law enforcement, and he quickly became a person of interest. Friends and family members revealed that their relationship had been rocky, marked by emotional tension and occasional outbursts. Police noted inconsistencies in his statements and found that he had not been fully cooperative. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, it became increasingly clear that he had crucial knowledge about Tabitha's disappearance. The investigative team gathered forensic evidence, digital records, and potential witness accounts to build their case. Perhaps most compelling was the fact that Aaron was allegedly the last person to see Tabitha alive. Combined with his suspicious behavior after her disappearance and his lack of urgency or participation in the search efforts, the evidence became hard to ignore. Then came the most painful discovery: Tabitha's body, found in a secluded area. It was evident that someone had gone to great lengths to hide her. This tragic confirmation gave law enforcement the green light to move forward with an arrest. Aaron Mitchell was taken into custody and charged with second-degree murder. The arrest brought a small measure of relief to the grieving family, knowing that there was a path toward justice, even if it couldn't bring Tabitha back. News of the arrest rippled across the community. For many, it confirmed their worst fears. But for Tabitha's loved ones, it marked the beginning of another long and difficult chapter: the legal process. While they were grateful for the progress, they were also forced to confront the horrifying truth of what had happened to someone so dear to them. The investigation showcased the critical importance of rapid response and thorough police work, but it also exposed a heartbreaking reality of intimate partner violence. Through their grief, Tabitha's family hoped that her case would serve as a wake-up call, a reminder to take the signs seriously, to listen to survivors, and to never dismiss their cries for help. After the arrest of Aaron Mitchell, the legal wheels began turning. The district attorney's office swiftly filed charges of second-degree murder against him, signaling that they believed they had enough evidence to prove his involvement in Tabitha's tragic death. For Tabitha's family, this moment was both validating and devastating. Knowing the system was responding, yet fully realizing the weight of what had happened. In the early court appearances, Aaron Mitchell entered a plea of not guilty. The courtroom was filled with heavy emotion, quiet tears, anxious faces, and hearts longing for justice. Tabitha's family and friends showed up in support, wearing purple ribbons to honor her memory and standing firm in their call for accountability. Their presence served as a reminder that Tabitha was more than a victim. She was a beloved daughter, sister, and friend. During the pre-trial phase, prosecutors laid out the evidence they had gathered: digital footprints, witness statements, and forensic details that painted a chilling narrative. Defense attorneys, as expected, pushed back, arguing the case was circumstantial and that Aaron had no clear motive. But the community had already heard too many stories of women silenced by former partners to ignore the weight of what the state presented. As the proceedings continued, the judge ruled that there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. This decision was a pivotal moment for Tabitha's loved ones, reinforcing that her case would not be swept aside or delayed indefinitely. The legal system was acknowledging her story, and with that came a renewed hope that justice could be served. Throughout the hearings, Tabitha's mother and close relatives remained dignified and composed. They spoke occasionally to the press, always with grace and quiet strength. Their message was consistent. This trial wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability, truth, and ensuring that no one else would suffer in silence as Tabitha had. The defense tried to challenge the credibility of some evidence, but prosecutors remained steadfast. Every hearing, every delay, every argument became a test of endurance of family. But they pressed on. They knew They had a duty not only to Tabitha, but to every other woman whose story never reached the courtroom. As the trial date approached, emotions ran high. The community that had mourned with Tabitha's family now stood with them once again, committed to seeing justice through. While no verdict could ever undo the pain or bring Tabitha back, there was a shared understanding that the truth needed to be heard, loud, clear, and in a court of law. Tabitha Tanner's death sent shockwaves not only through her immediate family, but also throughout her entire community. She was deeply loved by those who knew her, described as warm, generous, funny, and full of light. Her absence created a quiet emptiness that could be felt in every corner of her hometown. Friends spoke of how she never missed a birthday, how she checked in during hard times, and how she always made people feel seen and heard. Her family was devastated. Her mother, in particular, described the loss as a daily ache, waking up each morning hoping it was all a terrible dream. Tabitha's siblings struggled to come to terms with the idea that someone who had always been a source of joy, who had so many plans for the future, was taken so abruptly. They grieved not just the loss of her presence, but the loss of her potential. All the milestones she would never reach, all the memories they would never get to make together. In the weeks following her death, candlelight vigils were held, bringing together neighbors, classmates, co-workers, and even strangers who had been touched by her story. These gatherings became places of healing, remembrance, and advocacy. People shared stories about Tabitha, the silly things she used to say, her dreams of starting her own business, her big heart. These stories painted a full picture of who she was, not just a victim, but a vibrant life now gone. Her church community also played a significant role in honoring her memory. Sunday services included special prayers, and a bench in the church garden was later dedicated in her name. Pastors spoke not only of grief, but of the need to act, to protect, to listen, and to speak out when something feels wrong. Tabitha's loss served as a painful wake-up call for many, highlighting how domestic violence can wear a mask until it's too late. Many young women in the community, especially those around Tabitha's age, admitted that her story opened their eyes. It made them reflect on their own relationships, on warning signs they had ignored, and on the importance of speaking up. Her death became a tragic but powerful catalyst for change, sparking conversations about safety, boundaries, and the importance of community support systems. Schools and local organizations started hosting workshops and forums about dating violence, mental health, and healthy relationships. Tabitha's name was often mentioned as a symbol of why these conversations matter. Her story was used not to invoke fear, but to encourage awareness and collective care. In this way, her life continued to influence and inspire even after her passing. For the community, the greatest tribute to Tabitha is in the action her memory inspires. Her story is now a part of the town's heartbeat, a call to look out for one another, to love more openly, and to never take time for granted. While the pain of losing her will never fade, the strength of the community she helped build continues to honor her legacy every single day. Tabitha Tanner's story, though personal and deeply painful, echoes a much larger crisis facing communities across the country, the persistent and often hidden threat of domestic violence. Her tragic death is not an isolated case, but rather part of a troubling pattern in which individuals, particularly women, find themselves trapped in harmful relationships with few visible options for escape. Domestic violence wears many faces: physical, emotional, financial, and it thrives in silence. One of the most heart-wrenching aspects of Tabitha's case is that many people around her were unaware of the extent of the danger she faced. This is a common reality for victims. Shame, fear, and hope that things might get better often keep them from speaking out. Tabitha's case reminds us that abuse is not always visible. It can hide behind smiles, polite conversations, and carefully curated social media posts. In the broader discussion about domestic violence, education and awareness are key. Recognizing the early signs of abuse, such as control, manipulation, isolation, and emotional degradation, is crucial for both victims and their support networks. Had more people understood what was happening behind closed doors, perhaps there could have been earlier interventions. This is why continuous education at schools, workplaces, and faith communities is so important. Prevention efforts must go beyond just telling people to leave. It's not always that simple. Victims may lack financial independence, safe housing, or emotional support. Some may fear retaliation. In Tabitha's honor, we must advocate for stronger support systems. Shelters are adequately funded, legal resources that are accessible, and hotlines that respond swiftly and empathetically. Communities also need to be equipped with tools to recognize and act when someone they know may be in danger. Friends, neighbors, and even co-workers can become first responders simply by checking in, listening without judgment, and helping victims connect with professional help. Creating a culture of care, where concern is not dismissed as being nosy, but embraced as compassion, is vital. Moreover, there is a need for men to be active participants in this conversation. Addressing domestic violence must include challenging toxic masculinity, promoting emotional intelligence, and modeling healthy relationship behaviors. Men have a powerful role to play in breaking the cycle, as fathers, brothers, partners, and friends. Tabitha's story should be a rallying point for all, regardless of gender. Faith communities and cultural institutions must also confront domestic violence head-on. Too often, victims are encouraged to endure abuse in the name of maintaining a relationship or family image. But true faith, true love, does not hurt or control. Tabitha's loss urges us to break that silence and hold even our most sacred spaces accountable for promoting safety and healing. Policy change is another piece of the puzzle. Stronger laws on restraining orders, better training for law enforcement, and harsher penalties for abusers are necessary. But laws alone won't solve the issue. Hearts and minds must change too. Education, empathy, and empowerment must be woven into every layer of our society if we are to truly make a difference. As we reflect on Tabitha's life and the circumstances of her death, we're reminded that prevention is not just about reacting to abuse, but about creating a world where respect, safety, and compassion are the norm. Whether through mentorship programs, community workshops, or simply modeling kindness in our own relationships, we can all contribute to that vision. Tabitha's story is heartbreaking, but it's also a call to action, one that challenges us to be better neighbors, better friends, and better advocates. By keeping her memory alive and learning from her experience, we honor not just the life she lived, but the many lives we still have the chance to protect. Her story urges us to never look away, to never stay silent, and to always act in love. The tragic loss of Tabitha Tanner cannot be discussed without confronting the broader issue of gun violence in America. Her death is not just a story of domestic abuse, but also a grim reminder of how easily access to firearms can turn a violent relationship into a fatal one. When guns are involved in domestic violence situations, the risk of homicide increases by more than 500%. This chilling statistic emphasizes the urgency of tackling gun violence head-on, especially within homes and intimate relationships. Tabitha's murder shines a light on the fact that gun violence isn't always random or carried out by strangers. Often, it happens within families and homes, the very places meant to offer safety and security. It is in these intimate settings that firearms become tools of fear, control, and irreversible harm. We must ask ourselves, as communities and as a nation, how do we continue to allow such easy access to deadly weapons in volatile situations? One critical step is enforcing stronger gun control laws, especially those that prevent individuals with a history of domestic violence or mental health instability from obtaining or keeping firearms. Red flag laws, which allow for the temporary removal of guns from individuals deemed a threat to themselves or others, must be strengthened and widely implemented. These laws could have been life-saving in cases like Tabitha's, where warning signs were present long before the final tragedy. But beyond legislation, there's also a communal responsibility. Communities must foster a culture where individuals feel empowered to report threats, express concerns, and intervene safely when someone's life may be at risk. Whether the friend noticing increased aggression or a family member aware of illegal firearm possession, speaking up could prevent the next tragedy. Silence, in the face of danger, is never neutral. It often enables violence to thrive. In discussing safety, we must also talk about education. Schools, workplaces, and faith centers should include gun safety awareness in their community outreach programs. Young people especially need guidance on resolving conflicts without violence and understanding the long-term consequences of using a weapon in anger. We cannot wait until someone picks up a gun to begin talking about what could go wrong. We must also offer support to those living in high-risk households. People should not have to choose between staying in a violent home or facing homelessness and danger on the streets. Tabitha's situation reveals a deeper societal gap in mental health services, emergency housing, and long-term protective solutions. Bridging that gap will require investment, not just financial, but emotional and moral commitment from us all. Ultimately, Tabitha's story serves as a painful reminder of how gun violence and domestic abuse can collide with deadly consequences. Her legacy urges us to act with urgency, to push for reforms, to educate ourselves and others, and to ensure that safety is a right, not a privilege. She deserved a future filled with peace and possibility, not one cut short by a weapon in the hands of someone who once claimed to love her. In her memory, may we work toward a world where such tragedies become rare exceptions, not the rule. As we reach the end of Tabitha Tanner's story, we are left with a bittersweet truth. Her life was vibrant, loving, and full of promise, and her loss has carved a space none of us can truly fill. Yet within that space, a spark remains. It is a spark of awareness, of compassion, and of collective responsibility. Tabitha's light did not go out on the day she was taken. It passed to each of us who now know her name. Her story reminds us that safety at home is not guaranteed merely by lock and key. It requires open eyes, listening hearts, and communities willing to speak up when danger lurks in silence. Whether you are a friend who senses tension, a neighbor who hears late-night arguments, or a family member who notices sudden withdrawal, your voice can be the difference between hidden harm and life-saving help. So, let this be our call to action. Check in on those you love. Ask the gentle questions. Offer non-judgmental support. Share resources, hotlines, shelters, counseling, without waiting to be asked. Sometimes a quiet "Are you okay?" is a lifeline someone needs to step toward safety. If you see warning signs, don't dismiss them. Trust your instincts and reach out. Contact local domestic violence hotlines. Speak with community advocates. Encourage professional help. Your intervention may feel small, but small actions multiplied can prevent the next tragedy. On a broader level, lend your voice to policy change. Support stronger protective order enforcement, common sense gun laws, and funding for shelters and mental health services. Attend community forums. Write to your representatives. Volunteer at local organizations. Real change happens when everyday people decide that the status quo is no longer acceptable. And finally, keep Tabitha's memory alive. Share her story so that someone else might recognize the pattern she endured. Light a candle, post her photo, say her name. Each act of remembrance pushes back against the darkness that tried to silence her. In honoring her life, we honor the countless others who never had their stories told. Thank you for walking this journey with us. If Tabitha's story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Lat True Crime Stories for more compassionate, human-centered true crime narratives. Together, we can transform grief into purpose, silence into advocacy, and tragedy into a catalyst for safer, kinder communities. Let Tabitha's light guide us forward.